Hello everyone, this is my PHP tutorial for online store. I previously did one for a blog, but that one ended up, there was some error with Twitch and it got deleted or not recorded or something. So I'm making a new one so that this one will hopefully get recorded by Twitch. Let me just make sure they're still recording my clips. And then, yeah, okay, so they are. Alright, still recording. As soon as let me just delete this again. Delete that. Okay, I think we're all good. I'm just going to go ahead and get right into the middle of things. So, I'm going to do this tutorial. This tutorial will be best if you have some PHP knowledge already, because I'm going to go through quite a lot of things for an introductory tutorial. But you know, if you don't, you can jump right in, you can try it, and then you can kind of go back over everything later and reinforce it and learn it. But I really wanted to do a larger, more cohesive example rather than just, you know, little programs here and there. So if you're not familiar with PHP, PHP it stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. So yes, the P in PHP stands for PHP, which is kind of funny. It, you know, it kind of works off itself. Originally, it was called PHP/FI, which stood for Personal Homepage Forms Interpreter. And it was created back in 1995. But that's just some basic history of PHP. What's more relevant right now, if you're thinking, well, why should I learn PHP? Or if you're just learning a bit of PHP and you're going, is this really the language for me? PHP definitely isn't for everybody, but one of the nice things about PHP is it's one of the most popular languages, and it's been around for a bit, so it's very widely supported. You can go to a lot of different web hosts. If you're not, you know, a super pro server admin, you can go to a lot of web hosts and they'll already have PHP installed for you. You don't have to mess with any of that yourself. You don't have to mess with the configuration. There's a huge community. There's a lot of resources to help you out if you're having any problems with it. There's a lot of code libraries written for it, which means like things for interacting with databases and stuff like that, so that you don't have to code everything yourself. There's work done for you. And it's very large, very widely maintained. So for a tutorial today, I'm actually going to go ahead and disable my cam because I don't really need it for this tutorial, and it'll give me more screen space to show my notes up here. Okay. So I'll also give a quick introductory thing on how to process PHP files. Okay. In order to be able to run a PHP file, you need a couple things. You need to have PHP installed somewhere. So what that means is there's actually a PHP a program called PHP, which you install on a web server. Which a web server is just a fancy name for a computer that other people access. That's basically all it means. So usually what you'll do, like I have a hosting through a web host. So I have a web server that's in Michigan. Okay? So then people access that through the internet. So the way you can also, if you wish, you can use things like XAMPP is the name of a popular program that people use, which allows you to, it comes with Apache, I'll explain that in a second, but it comes with Apache, MySQL, and PHP, and it allows you to run PHP applications on your own computer. You can also download Apache and PHP by yourself and just install them. I did that at one point. That's the preferred method for a lot of people. So essentially you install a web server on your own computer, and then what you just do is you actually don't open it up to outside access, you just use it yourself. But if you want other people to access your web pages, which when you're programming, one of the easiest ways, like if you're working on your own projects and you're trying to maintain motivation, one of the easiest ways to maintain motivation when you're working on your own project is to show it to other people and get some feedback, and listen to what they have to say about it, and hear reactions and stuff like that. It's a lot better than just doing it yourself. Okay, so if you have a web host, usually what you're going to do is they'll give you the way I access it is through FTP. FTP is File Transfer Protocol. You can use a program like FileZilla FTP Client, which you can just do a quick Google of it. It's right here, filezillaproject.org. You can download the client. Important note, there's client and server. You want to know the client. So you download that, and then you can put all of your details into here. The host, IP address, your username and password, which I'm not going to show you guys obviously, and all that. Okay, and then the other thing you need is you need a program to write your code in. At a basic level, you could use Notepad, but I prefer Notepad++ because it gives you a few features I'll talk about in a second. You can find Notepad++, again, just Google it. Notepad++. The thing I really like about Notepad++ is that it is very, very streamlined and simplified. So it's one of the least invasive text editors out there, and it allows you to do things really quickly. Now, it doesn't offer as many fancy features as some things do. Like some things have a lot of auto-completion, like they'll auto-complete your brackets for you, and they'll recognize variables from other places in your files and stuff like that. It doesn't offer the most of that, and it doesn't offer like PHP testing built in and some other fancy features that something like Komodo IDE would offer, or possibly NetBeans, but I haven't tried NetBeans. But again, it's very streamlined and simple. Okay, so if you want to write some PHP code in Notepad, I'm going to start out with just the basics in PHP, and then we'll work up to applying this to a store. So the basics in PHP, you should already know HTML before you learn PHP, and CSS. You don't necessarily have to be a master in them, but you need to at least know how to construct a basic HTML web page. And probably the most important component is you need to know HTML forms, because PHP largely deals with HTML forms. If you're not familiar with what an HTML form is, hold on, let me just make a little web page here. Also, a little trick in Notepad++, to enable syntax highlighting, there's two ways you can do it. You can save the file with the extension that you want it to be, or you can go to Language and then select the right language. For this case, I'm going to use PHP. Now you'll notice something interesting. These are getting highlighted like an HTML file. Every PHP file is by default an HTML file. That might be a little bit hard to process. To say it another way, a PHP file gets treated like an HTML file unless you actually add PHP code to it, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, so we're just going to call this test.php. I'm going to use my examples directory for this. Okay. So then, when you want to upload this, you save it in Notepad++. You can then use FileZilla. I've already connected to the server. You want to navigate to the same directory that you want it to be in on your server, and then navigate to it on this side. So this is your computer. This is the server. Let me just wait a second for it to refresh the connection. Okay, and then once you've uploaded your files to a PHP configured server, you can access them with the web address. Okay, so you see this is a test page, the title's up there. That's all good. And this is to note, this is a .php file, right? But all that's in it is HTML, and all the HTML shows up as you would expect. Same thing with CSS if you want to add some CSS. CSS styling works too. Okay, now where you get into PHP is you have to add these magical tags called PHP tags. So you'll notice it kind of looks like an HTML tag, and that we got the angle brackets going on. The first tag you start, you do angle bracket question mark PHP, and then the ending tag is just a question mark and a closing bracket. You don't have to write like PHP here or anything, or PHP closing. You just do the closing like this. Okay, and then what happens is anything from this tag to this tag gets evaluated as PHP code instead of HTML. So what would happen if we tried to put some HTML in here? Let's say I tried to put another, well, I'll just do a regular paragraph. Okay, let's see what happens. I get an error, parse error, syntax error, okay? This is a sign that PHP is running, because this is a PHP error. When PHP is evaluating the code and it finds something wrong, it will stop and it'll tell you, for the most part. So we'll go ahead and take that out. So anyways, and this is one of the strengths of PHP as opposed to some other things, is you can embed it in HTML. This is one of the, in terms of a specialty, this was what PHP was originally designed to do. It was designed to be embeddable inside an HTML web page. Not a lot of scripting languages can do this. A lot of them have to display the HTML, which, by the way, is a choice you can do. If you want to display the HTML from within PHP, you can do that using the output command in PHP. The standard output command in PHP is echo, but you can also use print. You can just type echo PHP paragraph. Actually, I'll do the classic one. Okay. So now you see hello world came up. So now we know our output is working. Because the hello world is here, we echoed it, and it showed up on the server when we tested it. Okay? And add some more spaces here. So this is how you do all kinds of output in PHP. You can add more of these. Some random output. You can also output a number, 1376. Okay, and we pull this up. Now, if we notice some random output, these got strung together. So this is an important note. Even if you do two echo statements like this, I'll show you guys here. So these are on separate lines in PHP. It doesn't put them on separate lines here. So what you have to do if you want to do a new line is you have to actually add the HTML BR tag. Oh, I forgot to upload, my bad. Now it works. Okay. I'm gonna move this back over here. So now, echoing things in PHP, that's all well and good. You can echo some text, you can echo a number, but that's nothing you can do without regular HTML, okay? To add some things you can do in PHP, let's start with variables, for instance. Variables is an important concept. I'm going to go ahead and add that to here. Output, we got echo, okay? Variables. So what a variable is a variable is like a container that you use to store information. So you create a variable in PHP by using the $sign. The $sign signifies to the code that you want a variable. And then what you do directly after the $sign is you name your variable. So let's say I wanted a number. I can make a variable titled number1. Okay? Then if you want to put a value in there, you just do the equal sign, and let's say I want to make it 7. Okay, and now the value of 7 gets stored inside the variable number 1. And then anywhere throughout the rest of my program, I can call this number 1 and I can use the value of that. It's just like the concept of algebra. If you're used to algebra and you see equations, you know, I'll write one here. Which, you know, you have like x is, you know, x minus 15 is greater than or is equal to 30, right? It's the same kind of concept where you can end up solving for this and you can find out by the process of, you know, let's see, x minus 15 equals 30. You move the 15 over to the other side, you find out that x is equal to 45. So then what you can do later is you can plug in 45 to this. You can find out that 45 minus 15 equals 30. In the same way that this x represents 45, but it could be something else if the equation is different, right? In the same way that x represents a value, these things represent a value that can change. Okay, so to use this, we tried our output, right? So we did echo. Let's do echo number 1. And then we can also echo variables. Number 1 is 7. Oh, let's add a space here. This might seem a bit basic to those of you who have some experience, but I promise I'll get into more interesting things soon. I just want to go over all the basic topics and ensure that we've talked about all of them. Okay, to discuss a little bit more about variables, when you name a variable, there are some restrictions to what you can do in a variable name. Okay, variable names have to be named using alphanumeric characters and underscores. Those are the only things you can use. You can use letters, you can use numbers, and you can use underscores. You can't use a dash like this. Like if we tried to name this number 1, you see how this doesn't work like that? Okay, if we try to actually run this, which by the way, don't be afraid to run code like this on a development server. Just don't be afraid to break when you're learning PHP. Don't be afraid to break things and see if it works. Unexpected, yeah, just that doesn't work. Okay, so the rules are, and then the other rule is the first character in the variable name cannot be a number. So you can do number 1, but you cannot do one number. You see that doesn't show up as blue anymore? And that's one of the really nice things about Notepad++. The syntax highlighting will give you a cue when there's an error in your code. Okay? You can name it number 1, you can name it number underscore 1, like that. That's all valid. There are a few reserved words that you're not supposed to use as variable names, but those are a more advanced topic that we don't really need to cover right now. Some of them, like you shouldn't use things like echo as a variable. It's probably a bad idea. And then there's some super globals, but PHP does a good job about putting the super globals with the underscore. We'll talk about that later as well. Okay, so now we know about output. We know about variables. Another thing I should note about variables is variables can store different types of data. This is a number. You can also store. We'll store a name. Okay, and you can display the name inside the text string. Okay, so we set name equal to John and we echoed the name and it came out there. Now this is interesting. I did a text string here, right? But I put a variable inside it. This is a special behavior in PHP. The reason you're able to do this is because of this $, which tells the script that this is a variable. Okay, but when you're doing strings, there's another way you can do a string, which is to do it with single quotes instead of the double quotes. You see these are double quotes and these are singles, right? If you use single quotes, the script will not evaluate variables. You can notice this reflected in Notepad++ because this is no longer bold. So it's hinting that this is no longer going to be treated as a variable. And if we run the script, we can see that that ends up being the case. Okay, so you see the second time it doesn't print out the name, it just puts that. Okay. Okay, so far no questions. That's good. A couple more things you can do with output I'm going to mention as well. You can use a little period like this to put two different outputs together. So the other way of doing a variable with a string is to use a dot like this. And you can put as many output items as you want together if you put a dot in between each of them. So we could add on like a number to this as well, like 12. And this dot is called the concatenation operator. Basically what it means is it's just putting two things together. Okay, so let me yeah, name John 12. So that all matches up. And if we were to change this to 14 and this to names, you would see the output reflected as well. So this should be names John 14. Yeah, that all works as planned. Okay. Another interesting thing that you need to know is about math. Math in programming languages is one of the easiest things to learn because it works almost exactly as you would expect math in standard algebra to work. If you're familiar with the order of operations in algebra, how multiplication comes before, or multiplication and division comes before addition and subtraction, and parentheses come before that, standard PEMDAS, right? It works exactly the same way in PHP. And pretty much in all programming languages, this is something that's standard. So you can run some math equations like, we'll use standard algebra variables like x. Okay, so we'll say x equals 1, y equals 3, and z equals 14. Okay, so we'll write some output to display these. Test that to make sure it works. Okay, we're 22 minutes in. I'm going to try to get the introductory stuff and the basics of PHP wrapped up by about 30 minutes, so we'll start getting to the meat of the store program, maybe by 40 minutes. Okay, so x is 1, y is 3, and z is 14. Okay. Now, if you wanted to do some addition, we could further define some other variables called a, b, and c. Okay, so a equals 0. We're just going to set these to 0 to do what's called initialization, which is setting an initial value to the variable. But, and then we're going to change that later. We're going to actually do some math on these right now. I'm going to move these up here because it's good practice. Okay, so let's try some math. Let's try x plus y. We're going to set that into a. A equals x plus y. So this is the standard way you do math. You do x plus 1. The thing you do need to notice is where the equals sign goes. Whereas in algebra, you might be used to saying 1 plus 3 equals 4, or x plus y equals z. You need to do that backwards because what's happening is this actually works like this. This is if you want to visualize it, this is the way this works. What the script will do is it will take whatever is on the right side of the equal sign. This is the equal sign. It will take whatever is on the right side. It will evaluate that, basically like calculating it, and then it stores the result in A, or whatever variable you have on the left side. So you need to put your calculations and everything on the right side, and then it'll get stored on the left. So okay, so we'll do a equals x plus y. Let's go ahead and check the result of this. Echo a br. So 1 plus 3 would expect the output to be 4. I'm just going to go ahead and change this a bit. Okay, so a is indeed 4. That is as expected. We'll go ahead and try b equals y minus 0. We'll do z minus y. Minus y. Okay, so b is 11. So z minus y, z is 14, y is 3, 14 minus 3, 11. Okay, that's all as expected. Now let's try a more complicated equation. We're going to do c equals, and I'm going to add some standard numbers in this just into the mix. You can mix numbers and variables freely in your equations. Like I'm just going to do c equals y plus 17 times z minus 2. Okay? I'm going to change this to be... Okay, there we go. So x plus 17 times y minus 2. Now this is interesting. This is where order of operations comes into play, because this is addition, this is subtraction. So according to the order of operations, this should be executed first. Okay, so we'll run the calculation here just to see how this in theory would play out. Okay, now we know these values ahead of time. We know that x is 1, right, and then y is 3. So we have 1 plus 17 times 3 minus 2. So if we were to evaluate this, we could do it like this. 1 plus 17 times 3 is, let's see, 45 plus 6 is 51. Minus 2, so 1 plus 51 minus 2. 1 plus 51 is 52, so this should be 50. Unless I made a mistake in my elementary math. I think I'm actually probably going to cut this and make a separate thing for the store. Okay, so C is indeed 50. So that works exactly the way we do. Now what if we wanted to add parentheses in here to mix it up? Okay, so we want x plus 17 to be evaluated first. So now what should happen is this should be evaluated, then this times this, then whatever the result of those two should be subtracted from 2. So in theory, if we have the same equation now, one plus 17 is 18. Okay, so we should see 18 times 3 minus 2. So then we should see 18 times 3, which should be, sorry, I'm bad, 36, 46, 54. Is that right? 54? I think that's right. Minus 2, so it should be 52. Alright, in theory it should be 52. Let's test it and see. We'll see if my math is correct. Okay, it is correct. 52. Yes, I'm really bad at math. It's really surprising for being a programmer, but... Well, basic arithmetic. So certain levels of basic arithmetic I'm good at, some I'm not. But see, the thing is, we live in an age where, like, if you don't know, 18 times 3 off the top of your head, if you don't off the top of your head know that's 52, it's okay because you have a smartphone where you can look that up in about 7 seconds. So, but anyway, so you can see that math in PHP works pretty much the same way that you would expect it to. Now, one important thing I do want to note is that the only symbols you really have are these basic ones. You have like plus, times, minus, divided by. You don't have like a exponent symbol, right? But we do have functions for doing that, which we'll explain a little bit later. Okay, so now we've seen output, we've seen variables, and we've seen math, which is very important because you end up doing a lot of math in programs. Okay, one other thing I want to express now, if you're new to programming, this is going to be a concept you have to learn, and it is these are all really familiar concepts if you've done algebra, which is why I think basic algebra is a really important requirement for learning programming. You don't need to be a math genius. You don't need to know calculus and trigonometry and quantum theories to do programming, but you should know basic. You don't even need to know like quadratic equation and that kind of stuff, but you need to know about variables and stuff. Okay, this is interesting. Let's watch how a variable's value can change. So we have x, which is 1, y is 3, z is 14. Okay? To note how a variable's value changes as it goes through the program, we'll start with x. So x is whatever x is. Okay, and then let's do some things to x. So, do things, sounds naughty. So we're going to say x is equal to x plus y. Okay, and then we're going to echo x again. I'm just going to copy paste this statement because it's exactly the same statement I want to run again. And then let's do something else to x. Let's say x is equal to x minus 20. And we'll echo it again and we'll see, and then x is equal to x times z. Okay, and we'll echo it again. So we're doing several things to it. Now you notice the echo statement is the same each time. The same time we're modifying the variable. Okay, if we watch, it goes from 1 to 4 to negative 16 to negative 224. So the same variable can change value throughout the program. It's perfectly fine. And another thing to note is if you were to switch the order of these around, it would change it as well. So to make this more clear, I'm going to do standard numbers. X plus 1, x minus 20, x times 2, just so it's more clear. Okay, so it starts out as 1. We add 1, it becomes 2. We subtract 20, becomes minus 18. And then we multiply it by 2, and minus 18 turns into minus 36. Okay, so if we were to switch this around to say minus 21st, okay, so it goes from 1 to minus 19, then we add 1, it becomes minus 18, minus 36. Okay, so the important lesson to learn from this is that the program is executed going down, and a variable on line 18 can have the same variable on line 18 and line 23 can have a completely different value. Okay, and the value is going to be whatever has affected it the most recently. Okay, the other way to demonstrate this is to keep reassigning it to a different value. So this isn't even math. I'm just saying x is 11, 15, and 18. And I'm going to take out the other echo statements. And if you're advanced and you're watching this, this might seem really simple, but the simple things like this, the thing about programming is that a lot of concepts in programming that may seem really simple, like, oh, you know, the most recent thing that happened is what affects the variable, right? That seems simple at first, but the fact is in programming, a lot of things apply all over. And they apply all over in more advanced things. Okay, so you see I set x to 1, 11, 15, and 18, but the most recent value is the lowest one, and that's what it ended up getting set to. Mint tutorial. No, probably not. Okay, but now that you guys should have a pretty good grasp on that. And one more time, the equivalent of math, if you want to do math with strings, well, not really math, but if you want to use strings, so let's say you want to add two strings together. You remember how I used that little dot when I was doing the output? You can actually assign a value like that. Okay, so we're going to set first name to John, last name to Smith, and full name to first name dot last name. Now we don't use plus. A lot of programming languages use plus. We don't use plus because that suggests a number operation. So what dot this dot is equal to is it's sort of the same as a plus, but it's for strings instead of numbers. And a string is just text if you're not familiar with the concept of a string. Okay, oh, I should echo this. Okay, echo full name. John Smith. Oh, but if you notice, there's no space in that. So if we want to add a space to it, we can do this. So we now have first name, this is a space, and the last name. And we have dots in between the items to essentially glue them together. John Smith. Okay, that's good. Alright, so that all pretty much works as expected. The next thing we need to get into, we have output, variables, math. How do you make a program intelligent, okay? Our goal for the next video that I'm going to be doing immediately after this one, I'm just doing an intro for this, but our goal for the next video is going to be to do to do a store, okay? So for store, we could display products and stuff like that, but what happens in a program is you want to be able to change, and this is what gives the program its intelligence, you want to be able to change the behavior of the program based on what the user tells it. Okay? We do this primarily using something that it's called if-else statements. Okay, so an if-else statement, what this does is it says if some condition is true, then we run this, otherwise we run that. Okay? Let's say you're a restaurant and you need to decide whether to show, you have a delivery website, right? You need to decide whether to show your customers the breakfast menu, the lunch menu, or the dinner menu. Okay? So we'll do a quick example for this. Well, let's say time. This is going to be the time of day. And it's going to be like, we're going to do this in 24-hour time. Let's just say it's 9 a.m. Okay? Now, let's say the restaurant opens at, we're going to, let me add, this is, by the way, this is what I'm about to do, is called a comment. A comment, you'll see it shows up green. The comment is strictly for you when you're reading the code. PHP does not touch comments at all. Okay, so it doesn't run anything on them or, you know, turn them, output them, turn them into variables, doesn't do anything with them. It ignores comments. So what this means is you can add sort of notes to your code with comments so that you can read them later. Okay, so we're going to say restaurant opens at 8, breakfast from 8 to 11, lunch from 11 to 4, closes at 4. So this is some basic parameters. From 8 to 11 a.m. the restaurant is serving breakfast. From 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. it's serving lunch. Outside of those hours it's closed. So what we need the program to be able to do is we need it to show the breakfast menu when it's breakfast time, the lunch menu when it's lunchtime, and then outside of those it needs to say sorry, we're closed. Right? So the way we can accomplish this is we could say, so we'll have this variable time is equal to 9. Okay, now we'll say if time is less than 8, because we open at 8, right? If the time is less than 8, echo, sorry, we're closed. Okay, what if it's not 8? Okay, so otherwise, we'll start with this. We'll start with the two-way switch. Let's just test this first. Okay, so right now if the time is less than 8, we say sorry, we're closed. Otherwise, hi, what would you like to order? Hi, what would you like to order? Let's change the time to 7 to see if this still works. So it's 7 a.m. What should we see? Sorry, we're close. Okay, so that all works. To examine the if-else logic here, what we do is we have this if statement, and whatever's inside these parentheses is what it evaluates. So it looks at this and it checks this. It says, okay, is the value stored in time less than 8? So the value stored in time is 7. So you can essentially think of the program as doing this. When it gets to here, it takes the value in time, which currently is 7, and it goes, is 7 less than 8? Okay, yes, 7 is less than 8. Run whatever code is inside these brackets. Okay, so these brackets just note a block of code for it to run. If that's false, we have this else, and else is sort of like otherwise. So if the time is less than 8, we echo this. Otherwise, if it's false, we run this other block of code. Okay? Now, the other way you can do this is you can add multiple. So, because we have multiple things we need to check here. We need to check that it's later than 8 a.m., but less than 11 a.m., or it's between 11 and 4, or it's after 4, okay? So let's add a thing to check for breakfast. So if time is less than 8, sorry, we're closed. Otherwise, how would you like to order? Okay? Let's say else if time less than 11. Echo, hi, what would you like to order? Breakfast. We're just going to do something simple like this. Okay? So if the time is not less than 8, which means we're open, but it is less than 11, then we're going to show breakfast. Otherwise, if the time is less than 4, we're going to show lunch. Otherwise, if the time is more than 4, we're going to say, sorry, we're closed. So let's test it and see how this works out. Okay, so you see, sorry, we're closed. The time is 7. Let's change the time to be 8. And you see, hi, what would you like to order? Breakfast. Let's change the time to be 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's say 12. So this should show us lunch. Sorry, we're closed. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, I forgot. We have to use the 16-hour clock. So 4 p.m. and 16-hour time is 16. Or the 24-hour clock, I should say. There we go. Time less than 16. Okay, there we go. There's lunch. Okay, and then if it's after they're closed, which is going to be 4 o'clock, so we'll put it at 17. And this is sorry, we're closed again. So what we now have is a smart program that, based on the current time, can display a different menu to the user, rather than displaying all the menus and having the user see things that are relevant to them. Okay. Now there's other ways you can do these if statements. This is a common chain where it checks each. What it does on a chain like this is it checks each statement, and then it goes on to the next one and it checks that. So right here we have the time of 17. Okay, let's say we had a time of 13. What it's going to do is going to check if time is less than 8. Is 13 less than 8? No. Go to the next one. Okay. Else if time is less than 11. Is 13 less than 11? No. Go to the next one. Else if time is less than 16. Is 13 less than 16? Yes. Okay, run this. And then what's important is from here, when it finds one that it likes, it skips the rest. So we don't have to worry about this running. Now if we were to set this to 17, then we get here, say, okay, 17 is not less than 16, go to this. Okay? This is a little bit obfuscated. Let's try another way to do this. Let's try something called nested if-else. Let me add this to here. So we're going to change this a little bit. I'm just going to wipe all this. And then there's another important thing to note about if statements. You can put multiple conditions in your if statement. So let's say we wanted to make this more clear. We're going to do, because if you noticed before we had to write sorry, we're closed 2 times. And generally if you write the same code twice anywhere in your program, you can probably optimize it. So we're going to do this. If the time is less than 8, or the time is greater than 16. Well, we close out 4. Yeah. If time is less than 8 or greater than time is greater than 16. Then this means we're closed, so we're going to echo sorry, we're closed. Otherwise, we're going to echo hi, what would you like to order? Let's be fancy as well. We're going to make a breakfast menu and a lunch menu. Okay, and we'll make a lunch menu as well. Steak and mashed potatoes. Then for third entry, let's go ahead and say maybe we want some nice Caesar salad. I love me some food. So a breakfast menu and a lunch menu. Now, inside here, because if we're in here, we know we're open. So then if we're open, we just need to decide, is it breakfast or is it lunch? So we can then add a check in here. If time, we're going to use these conditionals again, is, let's see, if it's less than 11, because 11 is when it switches to lunch, right? If time is less than 11, we will display the breakfast menu. I need to add breaks to here. Otherwise, if time is less than 16. But this is an interesting thing, because we actually, if you notice here, we say if time is greater than 16, because it closes at 16. But, yeah. I'm just going to put less than equal then. I'm going to change this. Okay, this is a little bit funny. I'm changing this because we want the restaurant to close at 4 p.m., which is 1600 hours. So if I say if time is greater than 16, then it won't say that the restaurant's closed until it actually hits 17, which is 5 o'clock. That's an hour later. That's not how we want it to behave. So I'm going to change this to say greater than or equal to 16. This means you're all familiar with these from algebra. Okay, greater than or equal to 16. So when it hits 16, it'll say it's closed. Okay, then in here we have our if else. If the time is less than 11, we echo the breakfast menu. I'll also echo the lunch menu. Sorry, we're closed. What's the time? 17? Okay. Let's try setting the time to 9. So, if the time is 9, we should see, hi, what would you like to order in our breakfast menu. Let's see if it does that. It doesn't show our breakfast menu. Now, why is that? Okay. Okay, so here's an interesting thing. See, here it says break fat. And up here, this is break fast. So, but this is the interesting thing. There's no error displayed. So we have no idea. This is one of the dangerous things about PHP, because unless you have extra error reporting enabled, it won't tell you when you're trying to use a variable that hasn't been initialized, meaning when you're trying to use a variable that there's nothing inside, it won't tell you. So if you get an error like this and nothing's happening, double check your variable names. If you're in Notepad++, you'll notice when this highlights green, if I highlight the lunch menu, this shows up as well. This is strictly a name thing. So I'm just highlighting this section of text, and it shows me any other places it appears. Okay, so I go over this, I can see that this is misspelled. Let me fix that. We'll try it again. Now it works. There's our breakfast menu. Let's say the time is 11. There's our lunch menu. Break fat, yeah. Gotta break that fat. Like losing weight. Caesar salad would be good for that as long as you go easy on the dressing. Okay, so now we have a smart program that can figure out whether it's open or closed and display the appropriate menu for the time of day. To make this more interesting, instead of having to change the time through our program, I want to go ahead and I want to make the time entered by the user, because that's what we want our programs to do, right? We want the user to be able to enter things. So we add this user input HTML forms. So here's the way we're going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and do it outside of this. We need to do an HTML form. So we're going to say form action equals test.php method equals post. Okay, so we're going to say what time is it? Okay, so we have this basic form now, which will submit this, what time is it, onto the time in here. If you're not familiar with the HTML behind this, I recommend going to w3schools.com. That's w3schools.com. You can Google it as well, and read up on their section on HTML forms. It'll lay out all the different form elements for you. But the important thing you need to know when you're dealing with a form going to PHP is there's two things that are really important. The action, this is where the form gets sent to you when you press submit. You could actually set this action to like this. Let's watch what this does. Okay, what time is it? 4. It goes to google.com. So whatever you put inside the action is where it's going to go, which we want it to go to our same script so that we can use the information here. So we're going to say test.php. The method is post. This is important for how you get the information. And then what you need to know here is you need to add a name attribute to any form fields that you need the data from, which this is what we want the data from. Okay, so then the way we actually get this data in here inside PHP is by using the super global arrays get and post. So because we set the method equal to post, all of our form data, if there is any, is in here. It's in this thing called post. Okay, which I'll discuss arrays in a little bit. Okay, but we don't know if the user submitted any information or not, because like right now I came to this website, I haven't submitted any information. Okay, so let's do this. We'll say if there's anything inside post, because if the user submitted anything, there'll be something in here. If not, there won't be. So if there's anything inside post, which I'll explain this in a little bit. If it's not empty, then we're going to run our code. So many stacking if else. Actually, let's do it a little bit differently. Let's just see if this works. Okay, Oh no, we have a syntax error. Unexpected bracket on line 26. Where is line 26? This is line 26. This bracket is unexpected. Oh, I need to put another parentheses. There we go. Sorry, we're closed. What time is it? Let's say it's 9. Nothing's happening. Well, that's not good. So nothing's happening when I click this. That's troubling. When something goes wrong with your program, what you have to do is just debug it. Okay, so we're going to look at this. We have our form variable. The thing you need to know about passing it to the programs is the time needs to be set. So that's okay. That's all the same. There's no typos there. That's all good. Time equals post time. Oh, if this is not a set, okay, we want it to be if it is set. Forgot about that. Okay, hi, would you like to order? Okay, but what time did I enter? I entered 14. Well, we'll just enter 9 as well. So what time is it? 9? And we submit this. So now, we entered 9 and we got the breakfast menu. If we enter 12, we get the lunch menu. If we enter 4, we get the close sign. So now, we don't have to set the variable inside anymore. This will actually show it based on what the user enters, which is very nice. This is what you want your programs to be able to do. Okay, to go into a couple of the things I did here, where you see these brackets, because this is probably funny, you haven't seen these brackets before, and then you obviously haven't seen post, and you haven't seen is set. Okay, what is set does is it checks to see if a variable is set. Alright, remember how we had the issue with breakfat, where we were trying to do that and it wasn't displaying anything? Okay, so when you get form information from the user, which this is the form, when they submit it, what happens is each of these input tags, anything with an input tag, gets assigned to a variable inside the post array. Okay, and the way you can access it is by using the same name as this name attribute. So the name here is time. We access it here using time. Okay, so if I were to put bananas here, I would access it using post bananas. Let's test to make sure that works. That doesn't seem to be working. Did I break it? My bananas are all working. Bananas, why are you not working? Oh, there it goes, it works. Okay, what time is it? 9. Breakfast menu. 5, we're closed. 18, we're closed. Okay, so that works. Same thing. So we'll just rename this to time again. So the key thing to note is whatever you set the name attribute to in the input tag, that's the key in the post array. So you just copy whatever you put in the name attribute into here and you'll be able to get the value out. Okay, so that'll work now. That's very good. So those are a lot of the basics of PHP. The other things we need to get into would be arrays, using functions, and loops. It's the important things. I need to take a quick break real quick to get a little bit more caffeine. Use the restroom. I will be right back. In the meantime, I'll play some music.
Why eat nachos on the run? Maybe your parents.
in Colorado, and I want to thank Brent and Linda Christensen for bringing me and Devin Graham out here to film at these amazing ice castles. All the information is in the description with their websites, and they actually built this. So yeah, they built them for people to come see, so you're more than welcome to check them out as well. Also, big thanks to Devin Graham for his amazing cinematography. You can check out his YouTube channel right there because he has incredible stuff on his channel as well. Also, let me know in the comments what you think of my dubstep music. This is an experiment for me, and so let me know if I should try it again, do more. or whatever you think. So thanks so much, guys, and you're awesome.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So we've been going through PHP and we learned about output, variables, math, how to change the behavior of a program using if-else. And then we just started touching into how to get information from a user using an HTML form and submit that. Okay, what I want to focus on going forward is some more key programming concepts. I'm going to go ahead and add these onto a list here, which are going to be arrays. And then what follow after arrays are loops. And then I want to talk a little bit about what a function is, how to use it. We're not going to be making our own functions yet because, no, we might get into that actually. But that's sort of maybe a more advanced topic. But you should at least know how to use a function and what the concept of a function is, which is essentially a sub-program. Let's see. Other than that, I think that mostly covers it. I guess I'll probably add, I think sessions and functions. Sessions are probably important to go over. I'll go ahead and add sessions. We might not end up getting to them, but I'm going to try. Okay. So to review where we just were, we just made this application that, let me take out some of these extra spaces. Basically, it displays a restaurant menu, and we now have it set so that the user can enter what time it is. The program will get that, and it'll use that to decide whether to say that we're closed, whether to show the breakfast menu or show the lunch menu. So now, if we want to get into arrays, we're actually using an array right now, and this is why I want to get into this concept. Okay? Because this, with these brackets, is maybe somewhat of a foreign concept. I'm going to go ahead and take this off, and I'm actually going to take all this extra HTML out too, which is not the best practice HTML-wise, but we're going to focus on the PHP from here on out. And I'm going to go ahead and delete all this. Okay, so arrays. What's an array, right? Well, we know about variables, okay? So variables are like containers, right? They you can store some information into them, you name them, and then you can store information to them. The best example I have for this is files on your computer. Variables are like files for your little mini files. Okay, in the same way that you can make a bunch of text documents, you can store text inside them. You can make a bunch of images, and then you have images inside them, right? You name them and stuff like that. That's sort of like what variables are. Now, what arrays are is arrays are like file folders for variables. Okay, so the same way, I'll go ahead and I guess I'll pull this up as an example. Okay, the same way we have our documents, right? And we have all these file folders. Or you have maybe like pictures and you got a bunch of pictures. Okay? In the same way that it would be really hard, because we have so many files on our computer, it would be really hard to keep them organized if we didn't have any file folders. We just have like 1,000 files, right? Or 3,000 files, whatever. So what we do instead is we have all these file folders, and it's awesome, right? Because you can keep things organized. You can do the same thing for a program. If you want to have, instead of having, when you get to a large program, like let's take a program where you might have a large amount of data that you have to process. Like let's say for our, I'll keep going with the restaurant example for the purpose of this. Let's say you're at a really big restaurant and they have a really large menu, and they want to store all the menu items individually. Or actually, I'll use a different example. I'll say students, because my favorite example for this is students. Okay, let's pretend we work in the IT department of a school, and they've ditched their old paper system and they finally want to use a computerized system to show all of the grades of all the students. Okay? Let's say we have, this is a really small school. Let's say they have 4 students and we need to show all their grades. Okay, we'll make variables for it. We'll say student 1 equals 4.0. He's a model honor student, honor roll. He's that annoying kid in class that he's always acing the tests and making you look bad. And then we have student 2. This is you. You're like a 3.4. The B just escapes you, Well, no, let's say you're 3.5. You get B's. You're not one of the Asian kids that gets a 4.0, super smart, but you get 3.5s, you're decent. Then you have the derp kid that's, he gets 2.7. He's probably on the football team. He needs to get up to 3.0 so he doesn't get kicked off, and he's got bad averages. He cares more about talking with people. And then you've got student 4, who's the average person, maybe 3.1. Okay? So we got all these. That's very nice. And we want to echo the grades. We can say student 1. Okay, a cool little trick in Notepad++ because, no, I'll just write the second one. Okay, echo student 2, student 2. Let's be honest, they're the smartest ones in the school. Probably. China is currently ranked higher than the US on like math and science tests, so probably. Okay, so we got our 4 students here. We'll go ahead and test this out. Okay, student 1, 4, student 2, 3.5. So that's all good. We display all the grades. Awesome. We got our computerized program for displaying grades now. Okay. Now let's say the school got a couple more students. Let's say they got 2 more students. Okay, no problem. We'll just add on student 5 equals. He's a real failure. I don't know why they accepted him. And student 6, he's pretty smart. He could be your new friend and study buddy. Okay, echo student 5. Echo student 6. Student 6. Well, one thing you might notice is this code actually looks really similar. If you notice, all of this code is the same except the number keeps changing. Right? Just the number keeps changing. These values are different. But this code here is really similar. Something I want to point out. But we got up to 6 students now. Now let's say this is great. You did such a good job on your program. They recommended you to this other school. This other school wants you to do the program, but here's the problem. They have 150 students. Now, do you want to sit here all day and manually, code this for 150 students? Because I don't want to write the same line of code 150 times for 150 different students. So this is an instance where we have a large quantity of something. It's really hard to keep track of manually. So instead we can use arrays because they're like file folders, right? So the way we would use arrays to do this, and I'm going to leave this up here for example, is instead of having student 1, student 2, student 3, we make one array. We call it students. Okay? And then we say students 1 equals 4.0. Students 2 equals 3.5. Students 3 equals 2.7. So we're using all the same grades from above. Okay, now you might be saying this doesn't look like it's actually saving any time so far, and you're right, so far it's not. This is just for an example of how you can use an array. What you do with the array is you declare it as an array like this, right? You can also just use the brackets, but I always find it's best practice to display it as an array. Okay, now when you want to access individual pieces of information, individual variables, you say the students, and then you use these brackets and use a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All of these belong to the students array, but they're individual things inside it. This is just like if you have a... This is just like on my server, right? So you say students 1, students 2, right? In your file folders, you would have, let's say, pictures. I have pictures cat. I have pictures cat eyes. I have pictures calcs rules. I have pictures course registration. Okay. or if you even were to go into like a separate folder, you have pictures, wallpapers. It's the same kind of concept. You see, students 1, students 2, pictures, wallpapers, pictures, macro meme, pictures, memes. It's the same idea. That's just how you access it. Okay, so now, like, yeah, you're exactly right. What we can do, we can echo student 1, students 1. I should add an important note here. If you remember how, what? Porn? What porn? I see no porn. Not on my computer. Oh wait, sorry. There was one picture. I know you guys saw it. Hot girls. I have some super hot girls on my computer. I know. You guys found me out. I'm caught. I did a Google search, and look what I found. Hot girls. Do you see this? This is what Google gave me when I searched for hot girl. This is what Google gave me. Google, you had one job. You had one job. Okay, I'll stop there. Second computer? No. Well, yeah, actually, it's a tablet kind of thing. So now back to this. We got this. Let's just. I'm actually going to remove all this because you've already seen what this is like. You know what that's like. Okay. So our students array. I'll go ahead and add students to br. So we'll just check and see if it works here. Hold on, this is really annoying, so I want to. Yeah, 4 and 3.5, it works. Awesome. But see, here's the thing. If we want to do this for 150 students, this is still kind of a pain in the neck. Right? Because we're still writing out all the code. However, here's where we have a better way. Let me introduce you to loops. Because you can do arrays like this. Oh, I should point out one other thing about arrays, by the way. You don't always have to use numeric keys. We'll actually touch on that in a second. Okay? Let's pretend, for the purposes of argument, let's pretend there are 144 other students in the array here. Okay, so we have 6. Let's pretend there's 144 others. Just pretend. Okay, because you have to put the grades in somewhere. Let's say let's say there's this mystical like database, whatever, that automatically loads them into the array for you. Okay, it's perfect. It does that for you, but you still need to display it, and you don't want to write 150 lines of display code. Okay, we'll put this aside for a second. I'm gonna comment these. 0.3. No. I'm gonna comment these out for a second. We're gonna put these aside, and I'm gonna introduce you to loops, because we're going to go back to the arrays in a second. What a loop does is a loop allows you to repeat a task. It allows you to do a task multiple times. Okay? Let's say I wanted to be annoying and print a really long string of the, like, let's say I wanted to print a lot of lols. Okay? Let's say I wanted to do lol, lol, whatever. So I'm going to print a really long string of this, right? Let's say I wanted to make this really annoying. So I can do this. It's great. I'll show this to the page, and we'll see nothing. There it is. La 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 la. Okay, that's great. What I could do, on the other hand, is I could do a loop, and that would look something like this. Well, that's interesting. I only see one law here, but there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 here. So we only had to write one law, but we managed to make the script show 10 to the screen. How did we do this feat of magical ingenuity? By using a loop. The easiest way to describe a loop, you see this? While x is less than 10, echo law, x equals x plus 1. This is a self-contained loop. Now, the way a loop works is it sort of works like an if statement. So we could actually write this. We could say if x is less than 10. I'm going to explain why it's important in a second. And we get one law. So if x is less than 10, we echo law, right? What a loop does is it runs the same kind of comparison as an if statement. X is less than 10, you know, fries greater than bacon, whatever. But what happens is in the if statement, in the if statement like this, once it does x is less than 10 and it runs this code, it gets to this bottom bracket. When it gets to here, the if statement keeps on going in its merry way. The while loop, on the other hand, when it gets down to here, it goes back up to the top. And it checks this condition again. And it says, is x still less than 10? If it's still less than 10, I'm going to run again. And it runs this code again. It gets to the bottom, it goes back up. And it checks this again. X is still less than 10, I'm going to run it again. And that's what a loop does. A loop runs over and over and over until something happens to make this condition inside it false. So in this case, the condition is x is less than 10. So the loop will run until x is greater or equal to 10. Okay, but as long as x is 9 or below, the loop will keep running. Now the way we make this run exactly 10 times is we start x at a value of 0 because 0 is less than 10. Right? And then so here's how it runs. X is 0. We go into the loop. 0 less than 10? Yes, 0 is less than 10. Echo lol. And then we do this. What does this do? X equals x plus 1. That adds 1 to x. X was 0, it's now 1. Okay, we go back up to the top. Is 1 still less than 10? Yes. Echo lol, go to here, add 1 to x. X is now 2. Go back up to the top. 2 less than 10? Yes, run. Throw lol, add 1, x is now 3. 3 less than 10, echo lol, add it, it's 4 now. You get the picture. So it's 5, we get to here, we run it, 6, still less than 10, 7, 8, 9 is still less than 10. Now here's what happens. After 9, we get to here, you add 1 to 9, it becomes 10. You come back up to the top of loop. Is 10 less than 10? No. If 10's not, if this is not, since 10's not less than 10, skips the remainder of the loop. To illustrate this, if I were to set x to 9, so we have x is 9, 9 is less than 10, we get one law. If x is 10, we get no laws. So if this condition is false, this entire block of code gets skipped entirely. Okay? But this is basically how it works. And since we have this and all we want to do with this is increment x, I want to show you 2 shortcuts to do this. Since this is a kind of repetitive code that you'll end up doing a lot, there's little shortcuts. If you want to write, if you just want to add 1 to x, maybe you want to add 2 to x, instead of having to write x equals x plus 1, you can write x plus equals 1. I'm going to show you this. X plus equals 1. To demonstrate this outside of the context of the loop, x equals 0. Okay, x equals x plus 1, x plus equals 1, and I'm going to comment all this out. I'll explain this comment in a second. Okay, 0, 1, and 2. So you'll see that at each of these places where we outputted, 1 was added. So it started as 0, we outputted, we added 1 to it, it became 1, we added 1 to it again, it became 2. So you see this had the exact same effect as this. Now let's make it trippy and add 1 more. Okay, it's 3, so it magically added 1. So it was 0, we added 1, became 1, made it 2, and then made it 3. So basically what this goes to show you is all 3 of these statements mean the exact same thing. Add 1 to x. They're just shorter and shorter ways of doing it. Okay? What this is shorthand for this. Now, if you'll notice this one's a little bit different. There's no number in this one. The difference between this and the top two is that the top two you can change the number that's added to x. This means take whatever's on this side and add it to x, right? This just means add 1 to x. To illustrate the difference, I'm going to change this number here to 2. So you'll see now it goes 2, 4, 5. So it starts at 0, we add 2, it becomes 2. Add another 2, it becomes 4. Now it becomes 5. So this only adds 1, and this is where this differs. But these two statements right here, x equals x plus 2 and x plus equals 2, these are completely equivalent. You could change this to be whatever you like. You could change this to be 17. You could change this to be 3.14159 plus the, I don't know, students 3. And this is kind of hard to see, but this is, if you look at 5, let me take off the decimals off this number so that you can actually see that it adds the same amount each time. So 5.7, 11.4. If you were to look at 5.7 times 2, turns out to be, big shocker, 11.4. Okay? So those are just shorthand ways of expressing the same thing. Generally, people get more tripped up on x plus plus than x plus equals. So I'll just use plus equals here. Let's say we wanted to, let's do another thing. Let's say we wanted to display all the numbers up to 10 for some strange reason. So we'll do, we can echo x here, and then we'll just add a space right after it, so we can see the numbers. Did I successfully upload? That's strange. Oh, because x is 10. Change it back to 0. There we go. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? So we got x plus a space. So now we can actually see the value of x as it runs through the loop. And you can see that x becomes 0 and it goes all the way up to 9 before turning 10, and then when it turns 10 the loop stops. Okay? Now let me let's take an interesting look. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let me see if you can notice anything here when I do something. It's just let's let's just try this. Let's just try this. We'll see if we notice any similarities. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay? So x is 1, then x is 2, then it's 3, then it's 4, then 5, and then 6. Okay, seems legit, you know, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And here we happen to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Similar. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So, here's an interesting thought. If our loop is able to take x and make it cycle from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, couldn't we maybe write this, but then just put x in here, and then each time the loop runs, it would be the next number? That'd be fun, right? Let's try it. See what happens. Because in theory, this should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we should get 4, 3.5, 2.7, 3.1. We should get all these, but let's see if it works. Oh my god, it works. Let me add a BR here because these numbers are less clear. Yeah. So look at this. Look at this. Do you see? Yeah, you know. You see how many lines of code we can replace with this? So we can already replace 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to apply the same concept here. So we can replace 6 lines of code with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Replacing 6 lines of code with 5 may not seem like a lot, but when there's 144 other students in the array here, I'll explain this bit in a second, by the way. Well, now we now have 150 students, and we are able to display 150 students using our same 5 lines of code. So in this example, because considering that before we had to use 1 line of code to display each student, so we would have had to use 150 lines, but we've managed to achieve that display in 5 lines of code. So we are now saving 145 lines of code. If you actually put that into percentages of how much we're saving, 5% is 3% of 150. So that's a 97% code reduction. 97% code reduction. And this is where the true power of the loop comes in, when you're dealing with large amounts of data. Data in this case, by the way, is the students' grades. And that's when you really save yourself a lot of time by using a loop. Okay? Now, let me get a little bit technical here and talk about a loop. Every good loop has 3 elements. You need 3 elements in a loop. You need the control variable, initialization. This is a little bit technical. You need the condition, and you need the control variable modification. Okay. Alright, so to remove this part and just talk about the array, this is the classic way a loop is run. A loop is run by having a variable that starts out at one value and then gets incremented. Incremented means you add 1 to it. So x starts out as 1 and it goes all the way up until it's 150. So we have to start x at 1. If we don't start it at 1, the results of our loop might be unclear. So we just want to make sure we start it, so we initialize it to 1 to make sure it's where we want. The second thing you need to add is you need to add a check here. This check checks the control variable against some value to, just so you have a point at which it stops. And then the third part, and this is very important, is you need to have control variable modification. This means you're changing the control variable so that at some point the loop will stop. That's what this means. This changes it so that at some point the loop will stop. At some point this will make the condition execute to false. So what this generally means is you're going to make the loop run a certain number of times. Okay, the control variable is the variable that you use to run the loop. You have to initialize it to a value. Each time then you have to check it against something, and then you have to modify it in some way so that eventually it will cause the loop to stop. Those are the 3 main parts of a loop. That's pretty key to running a classic loop. Now what's interesting, if you notice this little example I did up here, is this is a slightly different kind of loop. It's called a for loop. And I just talked about 3 elements. You might notice there's 3 parts to this. We set I equal to 7, we check that I is less than or equal to 150, and we increment it. So the for loop is pretty nice because it wraps all 3 of those into the parentheses. So you don't have to put them in separate places. Okay? What that means is generally if you want to run a loop a certain number of times, like 20, 34, 7,396, a for loop is a great way to do it because you can initialize the variable, check it against the condition, and increment it all in one. Then you just add your code that you want to run 7,396 times here, and you're all good. There's other reasons that you might want to use a while loop instead of a for loop. We'll get into those in a bit. But we've now gone over arrays and loops, so you should have a slight idea of the power of these. What do we want next? Functions and sessions. Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk about functions a little bit. I'll leave this code here for now. Actually, yeah. So functions, the concept of a function is like a, oh, by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask in chat about arrays, loops, functions, whatever. But a function is essentially a miniature program. It does a certain task for you, basically, okay? PHP comes with a lot of these functions built in. There's functions for rounding numbers, there's functions for checking input, checking output, displaying things, running a session, connecting to a database. There's thousands of functions. Maybe not thousands of functions already built in, but there's definitely thousands of functions you can get. Then the key point of it is it does a task for you. Now the way you have to use a function is usually you will call the function. So I'm going to use rounding numbers because that's a really easy example. Let's say I wanted to, what's the I for? Oh, the I in this instance is just a control variable. The name of the control variable isn't usually that important. I'm just using this as a variable because it's just a control variable. I'm just using it to run the loop. This variable's sole purpose in life is to just run this loop. So it starts at a certain number, and then it constantly gets incremented until it hits 150. And that's its only use. It's to make this loop run 143 times. 144 actually. But yeah, that's its only purpose, to make this loop run 144 times. Okay, so now for an example of a function, I'm going to take all this away because we don't really need this. say you have really long number. Let's say you're doing some complex maths. You have complex number equals 3.14159.265.358.9. I don't remember the rest of pi here. Times 4.3614 times 2.147483647, which is like integer max. Plus the meaning of life. So you have this really complex number. I have no idea why you'd use this in your application, but let's just say you do. We want to echo this complex number. So it's 71.4242673085. Okay, that's cool. Let's add some more gibberish. See if we can get this to display something different. What? Oh, the server's being laggy for a second. Okay. Still displays as the same. Okay, let's say we don't want this to display as this long value. Let's say we wanted to round it. How would you round it in programming? There, you could use some really complex multiplication, division. So if we wanted to manually round this number, we would have to like multiply it and then like chop off what's left at the end and all this really complicated stuff. But 42 is 111. That's great. But considering that people have been programming for like commonly programming, I would say people have been commonly programming for about, let's say, 60 years, because basically computers really started to the development of computers, I think, really started to take off in the 1950s when you had like transistors and shit. Sorry, crap, whatever. Before that, like, there wasn't really, you know, people used radios and stuff and televisions, but the things weren't really advanced to the point where you really had heavy-duty computers and programming. So computer science and programming took off in the 1950s and 1960s, right around there. Considering that people have been programming for 60 years, I am pretty sure somebody has figured out how to round a number using programming, and someone's probably written a function to do it for me. So I'm going to try and use that function. In PHP, that function is round. What we do with round, okay, is we use the function name, and then what we have to do is we have to pass it some information. So it's like a messenger boy, like a valet, something like that. Let's say, a laundry service. This is a brilliant example. Okay, a function is like a laundry service. Okay, you give it your clothes, your dirty clothes. It takes them, and it brings back clean clothes. So what we want to do is we want to take our dirty, long, ugly number, 71 point blah blah blah, and we want it to come back clean. We want it to come back as like 71.42 without all these extra trailing stuff. So we pass it to our laundry service round. We say, here's our complex number. I'm going to add a BR here. Unexpected. Oh no. Debugging example here, syntax error. This is something you see a lot. Unexpected semicolon on line 6. Okay, line 6. Oh, we need the parentheses here. I'll explain this in a second. 71s. Look at that. the second number, so our first output displayed this really long number. The second output displayed just the 71 part. So this was the first one. And then we took complex number, which we displayed here, so we know that complex number is 71.4223806.254. And then we said clean number is equal to round complex number. So round is a function. It's like a laundry service. We sent complex number to the laundry service and it came back clean. We stored that in clean number and we displayed it and we found out 71. Okay? So this is how we use a function. To use a function, you need to call it. Calling it means you use its name and the parentheses. Some functions, now what's inside here, this is information we pass to the function. Not all functions need information passed to them. Some functions, their sole job is just to display information. Let's see, what's a good example of a function that just displays information? I'll do this. PHP info. This is just gives you it gives you a lot of information about the PHP configuration on your current system. Okay, so I just called PHP info and it displayed all of this. Didn't have to pass anything to it, right? But generally the way you use a function is you will call it, you will pass some information to it, and then here's the interesting part. Here's the interesting part. This clean number right here, we said that this is equal to the function. Which that might seem a little bit strange if you're not used to this concept. You're saying, wait, this variable is equal to a function? How can a variable be equal to a function? What's this all about? We got a variable inside here and I'm confused, okay? What happens when you run the function is that the errand boy comes back. So let's replace this with numbers. We know from this that this is 71.4223806.254. Let's pretend we're PHP, we're running this, okay? We calculate all this, we find out the complex number is equal to this. Okay? So we echo this. Right? Then we pass it to here. What we do here is we call the round function. So we say, hey, yo, laundryman, come here. Here's this number, 71.4223806.254. Can you clean this up for me? Round it off to any clean integer? Laundryman says, sure. Goes away, cleans it up. When he comes back with the cleaned number, this entire thing, round, gets replaced with whatever he brought back, which is 71. Okay? So 71 then gets stored in here, and we display it, and, well, just to visualize how the data flows, 71 gets stored in there, and then it gets passed to here. And it comes out there. Hopefully that's not too confusing. But that's how the data flow works. When you send the information to the function, I'm going to place this again, complex number, because this is how the actual code works. And then what happens, like I said, is the function returns a value. It returns a number. Laundryman comes back. He brings the laundry back. Okay? And when the function is finished running, this entire thing here in the code is replaced with the value of what the function returned. So it's replaced with, 71. And that gets put in the clean number. Okay, you can also use this return value in an echo statement. So you can just say echo round clean number. Or we can be fancy and say rounded. Of note, you can't you can't put this function inside a string. Like you couldn't put it inside there. That wouldn't work. You have to call it from outside a string. Because everything inside these double quotes, except for variables, the script is going to treat like literal text. Okay, rounded to 0. Oh, which is just a complex number. Rounded 71. Okay. I'm going to remove this. We can also round. We can also pass normal integers to the function. So we could say round 2.3. We would expect this to display 2. Okay, that is 2 indeed. We could say 41.7865341982. We would expect it to display 41. After the update completes. There, now it's done. Rounded 42. 78. Okay, so the key thing here is when you call a function, you pass the information to it. That goes inside these parentheses. And then when the function is finished running, it replaces itself in the code with whatever the value it figured out is. So you can then use it there. Which this means you can add it to a function as well. So let's say we wanted to do, let's say we had a variable, right? Let's say we had x equals 2. We can then say x equals x plus round 2.1. And then let's echo x. X is 4. So you notice 2, 2.1. Since this is rounded, the point 1 will be taken off and it'll be 2. So we have 2 plus 2. That's 4. So that matches up to exactly what we would expect. Okay, so you can use these functions in a variety of different ways. Now, one other thing is sometimes you can pass more than one piece of information to a function. This is exactly the case with round. Another pro tip with Notepad, by the way, you can go to, especially for using functions, you can go to your settings, preferences, go to, where is it? Language, here, backup/auto completion. Okay? And check this little box that says function parameters hint on input. Okay? Now, watch what actually happens when I type this. I type in round, and then I press the parentheses, and look what this says. It says float round, in parentheses, float number, int precision equals 0, int mode equals PHP round half up. So this is very interesting. What this does is this tells you the order of the potential pieces of information you can pass to the function. Because the function is expecting certain pieces of information, you can't really just pass anything you want. You have to pass what it's expecting, and you have to pass it in the correct order. But then it can do interesting things. Like, let's say we wanted to take... I'm going to take that off. Let's say we wanted a certain... Let's do pi to as many decimals as we can. No, pi. Pi. 1 million digits of pi. So we have a lot of digits of pi there. So now we have this really, really long and accurate number of pi, but we probably don't want that many digits. Let's say the application we're making, this is used a lot by people like NASA and stuff when they're calculating like going to the moon and around planets. They need a lot of digits of pi because in space, when you're traveling millions of miles at, 30,000 miles an hour, tiny little error, like 3 millimeters of trajectory off, 2 million miles later, it turns into like this huge gap. So they have to be super accurate, and they'll probably use a lot of digits of pi. Whereas in your math class, they probably only want like 5 digits of pi. Because in your math class, it doesn't matter if you're, 3 decimal places off 100 decimals down. Anyways, so we have this big number of pi, and we're going to set x to a certain number of decimal places of pi. Let's use 2 for starters. We want to set it to 2. So we can round pi, comma, 2. See what this says. 3.14. Very interesting. So what this did is we passed a second piece of information. We passed the first piece of information. This is the number that we want rounded. The second piece of information is how precise we want the rounding to be. This is saying rounded to 2 decimal places. Let's say 5. .14159. Let's say 23. That's strange. That actually didn't look like 23 decimal places. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. Interesting. Oh, I think PHP has maxes on what it will display. Like the echo construct will only display a certain number of precisions of a number. But anyways, you get the idea. So certain functions will have multiple pieces of information you can pass to them, which will make them behave different ways. And that's generally about